Hello and welcome to this episode of the History of True Crime. Today we will look at the horrifying regime of the dictator Idi Amin, president of Uganda from 1971 to 1979. He is known for his brutal dictatorship and human rights abuses during his time in power. Amin was born in the West Nile province of Uganda in 1925. He joined the British colonial army in 1946 and quickly rose through the ranks to become a highly decorated officer. In 1971, he then seized power in a military coup, overthrowing President Milton Obote. But how did he get there? What kind of life did he have before becoming the brutal dictator he is known for today? He was born into a small ethnic group known as the Kakwa, who were not considered one of the major ethnic groups in Uganda at the time. Amin's father was a cattle herder and his mother was a domestic worker. He grew up in poverty and had very little formal education. He was forced to drop out of school at a young age to help support his family. Despite this, Amin was able to excel in sports, particularly in boxing and wrestling, which would later become a hallmark of his leadership style. In 1946, Amin joined the King's African Rifles, a British colonial army unit, and quickly rose through the ranks. He served in various campaigns throughout East Africa. Amin's military career was marked by his bravery and leadership skills, and he was eventually promoted to the rank of major. By the early 1960s, Amin had become involved in Ugandan politics and was appointed as the head of the Ugandan army in 1965. He quickly gained a reputation for being a ruthless leader, and his reputation for violence and brutality would become a defining characteristic of his rule. Amin's political career reached its peak in 1971, when he seized power in a military coup and declared himself president of Uganda. He ruled the country with an iron fist, and his regime was marked by widespread human rights abuses, including mass killings, torture, and political repression. He set about consolidating his power. He arrested and executed many of his opponents, including other military leaders, and purged the government and military of anyone who was not loyal to him. He also set up a network of secret police to monitor and control the population. The secret police force, known as the State Research Bureau, was responsible for the torture and murder of thousands of people. He also expelled the Asian population of Uganda, seizing their property and businesses. This was carried out in 1972. And around 60,000 people were forced to leave the country. Many of these individuals were business owners, and the forced expulsion resulted in the seizure of their properties and assets by the government. Some Asians who refused to leave or who were unable to leave were subjected to violence, including brutal beatings and killings. The exact number of Asian who were killed is not known, but it is considered that many of them were killed by the security forces, while some were killed by looters. It is also reported that some were taken to detention centers, where they were horrifically tortured and killed. This mass expulsion was an act of ethnic cleansing, and it had a devastating impact on the Asian community in Uganda, as well as on the economy of the country. Amin's regime was also characterized by economic mismanagement and political instability. He nationalized many industries, causing the economy to collapse, and he frequently purged members of his own government to keep control. In addition to the atrocities committed within Uganda, Amin also engaged in acts of aggression against neighboring countries. In 1972, he invaded Tanzania and annexed a portion of the country. This led to a war between the two nations, which would ultimately result in Amin's defeat and downfall. His terrifying rule also had a detrimental effect on the Ugandan people. The economy was in shambles, and many people were suffering from starvation and disease. Despite his brutal rule, Amin remained popular with many Ugandans, particularly with the poor, who saw him as a champion of their rights. However, his leadership style and policies ultimately led to the collapse of the Ugandan economy, and the country was plunged into a state of chaos and turmoil. One of the most notorious aspects of Amin's rule was the mass killings that occurred during his regime. It is estimated that between 100,000 and 500,000 people were killed during his 8-year rule. The killings were often carried out in a brutal and indiscriminate manner, with entire communities being massacred. The methods of torture used by his security forces included beatings, mutilation, electric shocks, and rape. Many prisoners were held in overcrowded and unsanitary conditions and were denied basic necessities such as food, water, and medical care. Some were even subjected to psychological torture, such as being forced to watch the torture of others or being kept in solitary confinement for extended periods of time. There were also reports of prisoners being thrown into crocodile-infested rivers and being eaten alive. It's also shockingly reported that some prisoners were forced to dig their own graves before being killed. The scale of human rights abuses under Idi Amin's regime was extensive and many people suffered greatly. Amin suppressed political opposition and freedom of speech. He banned opposition parties and arrested and detained political opponents. The press was also heavily censored, and journalists who wrote critical articles were often arrested and tortured. He had total control and abused his power completely. In 1978, neighboring Tanzania, under the leadership of President Julius Nyerere, became increasingly concerned about Amin's aggressive expansionist policies and human rights abuses, and decided to intervene. In October of that year, Tanzania launched a military invasion of Uganda with the goal of toppling Amin's regime. The Tanzanian forces were able to quickly gain the upper hand, and by April 1979, they had captured Kampala, the capital of Uganda. Amin was forced to flee the country, and his brutality and cruel regime finally came to an end. Amin fled to Libya and later to Saudi Arabia, where he lived in exile until his death in 2003. Despite the atrocities committed during his rule, Amin has become somewhat of a cult figure in Uganda. Some view him as a hero who stood up to foreign powers, while others see him as a sadistic, power-hungry monster who brought nothing but death and destruction to the country. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like and subscribe button, and do please share with your friends. Please drop your comments below on any future true crime stories you would love to learn more about and any suggestions for our next video. Subscribe to be in the loop and stay in the know for when our next video drops. And don't forget to check out our #1 resource in the description below. Thank you.